The aftermath of the confrontation left Lila and Ethan drained, both physically and emotionally. They sat together on the cold concrete floor of the garage, their backs against the wall, trying to process what had just happened. The man in the dark coat remained unconscious, slumped against the far wall, where Lila's final burst of energy had sent him. His presence was a constant reminder of the danger they were still in. "We need to do something about him," Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. "We can't just leave him here." Lila nodded, though her mind was racing. What could they do? Calling the police seemed like the obvious choice, but how would they explain the situation? A mysterious man with unnatural strength attacking them in a garage sounded absurd, even to her. And then there was the matter of her powers. If the authorities started asking questions, how much would she have to reveal? "I don't know if we should involve anyone else," she admitted quietly. "This isn't normal. People might not understand." Ethan frowned, considering her words. "You're probably right, but we can't just let him wake up and come after us again." "No," Lila agreed. "But maybe we can figure out who he is first, why he's here, what they want from me." Her suggestion hung in the air between them, heavy with uncertainty. It was risky, dangerous, even, but it was also the only way to get answers. If they handed him over to the police without knowing more, they'd be leaving themselves vulnerable. Whoever they were, they clearly weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. "All right," Ethan said after a moment, his voice firm. "Let's see what we can find out." Together, they approached the unconscious man cautiously, keeping their distance in case he woke up suddenly. Lila knelt beside him, her hands trembling slightly as she reached out not to touch him, but to probe his mind. She hesitated, unsure of what she might find. Telepathy wasn't an exact science, especially when dealing with someone as powerful as this stranger. Still, she had no other choice. Closing her eyes, she focused all her energy on connecting with his thoughts. At first, there was nothing but static, chaotic bursts of energy that resisted her attempts to make sense of them. Then, slowly, fragments began to surface. Images flashed before her mind's eye. A sleek spaceship, a council chamber filled with stern-faced figures, a map of Earth marked with coordinates, and beneath it all, a single name repeated like a mantra: Kale Draven. She pulled back abruptly, gasping for air. Ethan immediately crouched beside her, concern etched across his face. "What did you see?" he asked softly. "He's one of them," she replied, her voice shaky. "A Valen. His name is Kale Draven. He's part of some kind of mission to bring me back." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Back where?" "To my home planet," she whispered. "Or at least, to their headquarters. I don't know why they want me so badly, but it's clear they're not giving up." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the situation settled heavily on their shoulders. Lila felt a surge of anger mixed with fear. After everything she had been through, after finally finding a place where she belonged, they still wouldn't leave her alone. "What are we going to do?" Ethan asked finally, his tone resolute despite the tension in the room. "If they send more people like him." "They will," Lila interrupted, her voice bitter. "They always do. My abilities. They're too dangerous to ignore. To them, I'm either a weapon or a threat." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently. "Not to me," he said firmly. "To me, you're just Lila, and I'm not letting anyone take you away." His words brought tears to her eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he truly meant it. But the reality was harsh. Staying with him put him in harm's way. Every second she spent by his side made him a target. Yet, despite the danger, she couldn't imagine leaving him behind. He had become her anchor, her reason to keep fighting. "We'll deal with this," Ethan continued, his voice steady. "One step at a time. First, we need to secure him, make sure he doesn't wake up anytime soon. Then, we'll decide our next move. Working quickly, they bound Cale's hands and feet with rope scavenged from the garage, ensuring he couldn't move even if he regained consciousness. They also gagged him, just in case. Once he was secured, they dragged him into a storage closet and locked the door, setting up a makeshift alarm system to alert them if he tried to escape. With that done, they collapsed onto the couch in the small apartment above the garage, exhaustion overtaking them. For a while, they simply sat in silence, listening to the distant hum of traffic outside. The world beyond the garage seemed impossibly far away, as if they were living in a bubble of their own making. Eventually, Ethan broke the quiet. "Do you think your people will stop coming after you?" he asked, his tone cautious. Leela shook her head. "No, not unless I give them a reason to." "And what would that be?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her lap. "I don't know. Maybe, if I prove I'm not a threat, or if I find a way to control my powers completely. But that's not easy. Even now, I struggle sometimes." "You've gotten better," Ethan pointed out. "Look at what you did today. You held your own against someone who was stronger than you thought possible." "That was desperation," she countered, though her cheeks flushed slightly at the compliment. "It's different when you have something or someone to fight for." Ethan smiled faintly. "Well, whatever it was, it worked, and it shows that you're capable of handling yourself." Her heart swelled at his faith in her, but doubt lingered. Could she really stand up to her own people? Would they ever accept her, or would they always see her as a threat? These questions haunted her, gnawing at the edges of her resolve. As the hours passed, fatigue began to take its toll. Ethan suggested they get some rest, but Leela insisted on taking the first watch. "I won't be able to sleep anyway," she said firmly. "Besides, I owe you. You've done so much already." He didn't argue, knowing better than to push her when she was determined. Instead, he stretched out on the couch, pulling a blanket over himself. Within minutes, his breathing grew slow and steady, signaling that he had fallen asleep. Left alone with her thoughts, Leela wandered to the window and stared out at the city below. The lights twinkled like stars, casting a soft glow over the streets. It was beautiful, peaceful almost, a stark contrast to the chaos inside her mind. She thought about her life on her home planet, the rejection, the loneliness, and compared it to the warmth and acceptance she had found here, with Ethan. Despite everything, she realized she had never felt more alive than she did now, even with the constant threat hanging over her head. By morning, they were both awake, discussing their next steps. Cale had yet to stir, which bought them some time, but they knew it wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, reinforcements would arrive, and they needed to be prepared. "We should leave town," Ethan suggested, "at least for a while. Get somewhere safe until we can figure things out." Leela nodded reluctantly. "It might be our best option, but where would we go? And how do we stay hidden from them?" "We'll figure it out," Ethan replied confidently. "We've made it this far. We'll keep going." His optimism gave her strength, even as fear clawed at the edges of her resolve. Together, they packed what little belongings they could carry and loaded them into Ethan's old truck. Before leaving, Leela took one last look at the garage, the place that had become her sanctuary, and whispered a silent thank you. As they drove away, heading toward an uncertain future, Leela reached over and took Ethan's hand. He glanced at her, smiling faintly, and gave her fingers a reassuring squeeze. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could outrun her past and build a new life with the person who had shown her what it meant to truly belong. Leela Arden stood at the edge of the forest, her heart heavy with sadness. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting long shadows across the ground. She could feel the weight of their stares on her back, even though no one was there. The Valens, her own people, had turned their backs on her. They didn't want her anymore. It wasn't just rejection, it was something deeper, colder. They feared her. They feared what she could do. From the moment she was born, Lila had been different. Her parents had noticed it first when she was just a child. While other children played games and laughed, Lila would sit quietly, staring into space as if listening to voices only she could hear. At first, they thought it was a phase, something she would grow out of. But as the years passed, her abilities grew stronger. She could sense emotions, thoughts, even memories from those around her. Sometimes, without meaning to, she would project her own feelings onto others, overwhelming them with bursts of joy or sorrow. The elders of her village called it chaos. "She is dangerous," they whispered among themselves. "Her powers are too wild, too unpredictable." No matter how hard she tried to control them, accidents kept happening. Once, during a festival, she accidentally caused an entire crowd to collapse in tears because she was feeling lonely. Another time, while arguing with a friend, she unintentionally made him forget who he was for hours. Each incident pushed her further away from the people she loved. Lila wanted nothing more than to belong. She begged the elders to teach her how to use her gifts properly, but they refused. "You are not like us," they told her sternly. "Your presence disrupts our harmony." Those words stung worse than any punishment. Harmony meant everything to the Valens. Their society thrived on order, balance, and unity. And Lila, she was the opposite of all those things. As she grew older, the isolation became unbearable. Friends stopped inviting her to gatherings. Neighbors avoided her gaze when she walked by. Even her family began treating her differently, speaking to her in hushed tones, as if afraid she might lash out at any moment. One day, after yet another failed attempt to prove herself worthy, Lila decided she couldn't stay any longer. If her own people couldn't accept her, then maybe someone else would. Leaving her home planet wasn't easy. The Valens valued tradition above all else, and leaving without permission was considered a grave offense. But Lila didn't care about rules anymore. She packed a small bag with a senchuza, few changes of clothes, some food rations, and a device that could disguise her appearance, and slipped away under the cover of darkness. The journey to Earth took several days, during which she barely slept, constantly worried that someone might catch her before she reached safety. When she finally arrived, she was both terrified and amazed. Earth was unlike anything she had ever seen. Its skies were filled with strange flying machines, its streets teeming with life. People rushed past her, talking loudly into handheld devices, or laughing with friends. Colors seemed brighter here, sounds sharper. Everything moved so quickly, almost chaotically, yet there was a certain beauty in it. For the first time in years, Lila felt alive. To blend in, she activated her holographic disguise. Her silver hair turned brown, her pointed ears rounded, and her glowing eyes dulled to a soft hazel. Now, she looked like any other human woman. Still, she knew she couldn't let her guard down completely. Humans may not have possessed telepathic abilities, but they were observant in their own way. She needed to be careful. Her first few days on Earth were spent wandering aimlessly through crowded streets, trying to understand this new world. She visited parks, cafes, and markets, soaking in the sights and sounds. But despite the excitement, loneliness crept in. Everyone around her seemed connected to their families, their jobs, their lives. Lila had nothing and no one. Then, one afternoon, fate intervened. As she strolled through a quieter part of the city, she stumbled upon a small garage tucked between two larger buildings. A sign above the door read Blake's Auto Repair. Curious, she peeked inside and saw a young man bent over an engine, his hands covered in grease. He looked up briefly, noticed her watching, and smiled. "Hey there," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Need something?" Lila hesitated. She hadn't expected anyone to acknowledge her, let alone speak to her so kindly. She stammered, unsure of what to say. Before she could come up with an excuse, she accidentally knocked over a toolbox sitting nearby. Tools clattered to the floor, scattering everywhere. "Oh no," she gasped, bending down to pick them up. "I'm so sorry." "It's fine," the man chuckled, crouching beside her to help. "Don't worry about it. I'm Ethan, by the way." "Leela," she replied softly, avoiding his gaze. They worked together in silence for a moment, gathering the scattered tools. When they finished, Ethan stood up and extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, Lila. You new around here?" She nodded, still feeling awkward. "Yes, I'm trying to figure things out." "Well, welcome to the neighborhood," he said warmly. Then, after a pause, he added, "If you're looking for work, I could always use an extra pair of hands. Around here, pay's not great, but it's honest." Lila blinked in surprise. Was he serious? After everything she'd been through, someone was offering her a chance. She opened her mouth to respond but found herself speechless. Instead, she simply nodded again, managing a small smile. "Great," Ethan grinned. "Come by tomorrow morning, and we'll get started." And just like that, Leela found herself with a purpose again. Working at the garage gave her structure, something she desperately needed. Ethan taught her the basics of car repair, how to change oil, replace tires, and fix minor engine issues. Though she struggled at first, her quick mind allowed her to learn fast. More importantly, Ethan never judged her for her mistakes. If anything, he encouraged her, praising her progress and cheering her on. Over time, their friendship deepened. Ethan confided in her about his own struggles, how he'd lost his parents at a young age, and how fixing cars had become his way of coping with grief. In return, Lila shared bits and pieces of her story, careful not to reveal too much. She told him about feeling misunderstood and rejected, about searching for a place where she belonged. Ethan listened intently, nodding along as if he truly understood. For the first time in years, Lila felt hope. Maybe Earth wasn't such a bad place. After all, maybe, just maybe, she had found somewhere and someone who accepted her for who she was. Leela's days began to take on a rhythm she hadn't known in years. Each morning, she woke up early, the sun streaming through the small window of the apartment above Ethan's garage. The space wasn't much, just a tiny kitchenette, a narrow bed, and a few shelves for her belongings, but it was hers. For the first time in what felt like forever, she had a place to call home. She would dress quickly, careful not to disturb the quiet stillness of the morning, and head downstairs to start her workday. Ethan was usually already there, tinkering with something under the hood of a car or sorting through tools. He greeted her with the same warm smile every day, as if he genuinely meant it. "Morning, Leela," he'd say, handing her a cup of coffee from the old machine in the corner. "Ready to get your hands dirty?" At first Lila didn't know how to respond to such kindness. Back on her home planet, people had either ignored her or treated her with suspicion. But Ethan was different. There was no judgment in his eyes, no hidden fear. He simply accepted her, as she was, or at least, as she appeared to be. That acceptance gave her a sense of peace. She hadn't realized she'd been missing. The work itself was challenging but rewarding. Leela had never imagined herself fixing cars, but Ethan made it seem almost fun. He taught her step by step, explaining each part of the engine and its purpose. "This is the carburetor," he said one day, pointing to a small metal component. "It mixes air and fuel so the engine can run smoothly." Lila nodded, pretending to understand, though half the time she was just trying to keep up. Still, she found herself enjoying the process, the hum of the machines, the smell of oil and grease, the satisfaction of solving a problem. What surprised her most, though, was how much she enjoyed Ethan's company. He had a way of making even the most mundane tasks feel meaningful. When they worked together, he talked about everything: his childhood growing up in a small town, his love for classic rock music, his dreams of one day opening a bigger shop. Sometimes, he asked questions about her past, but always gently, never pushing too hard. Leela appreciated that. She wanted to tell him the truth, but she wasn't ready not yet. As the weeks passed, Lila started to notice little things about Ethan, how he whistled softly when he was concentrating, how he always wiped his hands on the same rag, even when it was completely soaked with grease, how he seemed to light up whenever a customer praised his work. These small details made him feel real, human, in a way that reminded her of why she had come to Earth in the first place. Here, among these imperfect, flawed people, she felt less alone. But there were moments when doubt crept in. Late at night, lying awake in her tiny bed, Lila would wonder if she was fooling herself. Could she really build a life here? What if someone discovered her secret? The thought terrified her. Humans might not have the same abilities as the Valens, but they weren't stupid. Sooner or later, someone would figure out that she wasn't who she claimed to be. One evening, after a long day at the garage, Ethan invited her to join him for dinner at a nearby diner. "You've been working hard," he said, leaning against the counter. "Let me treat you." Leela hesitated. She rarely left the garage unless absolutely necessary, afraid of drawing attention to herself. But Ethan's expression was so earnest, so inviting, that she couldn't say no. "Okay," she said finally, forcing a smile. "Thank you." The diner was bustling with activity when they arrived. People sat in booths, chatting and laughing over plates of food. A jukebox in the corner played a slow, melancholy tune. Ethan led her to a table near the window and slid into the seat across from her. "So," he said, picking up a menu. "What sounds good?" Lila scanned the options, her heart racing. She had eaten human food before, of course mostly prepackaged meals from stores, but dining in public was new territory. After a moment, she pointed to a picture of a cheeseburger. "I'll try that," she said quietly. "Good choice," Ethan replied, signaling for the waitress. As they waited for their food, he launched into another story, this time about a road trip he'd taken with friends a few years ago. Lila listened intently, laughing at the right moments, nodding along. It was easy to forget, in moments like these, that she wasn't truly one of them. When the food arrived, Leela took a cautious bite of her burger. The flavors exploded in her mouth, salty, savory, slightly greasy. She swallowed slowly, savoring the taste. "It's good," she said, glancing up at Ethan. "Really good," he grinned. "Told you, best burgers in town." For a while, they ate in comfortable silence, watching the world go by outside the window. Cars drove past, their headlights cutting through the growing darkness. Pedestrians hurried along the sidewalk, bundled up against the cool evening air. Lila felt a pang of longing, though she couldn't quite explain why. Maybe it was the realization that this life, however simple, was something she could grow to love. Or maybe it was the knowledge that, no matter how much she tried, she would always be an outsider. "You okay?" Ethan asked suddenly, breaking her train of thought. His brow was furrowed, concern etched across his face. "You look, I don't know, distant." Leela forced another smile, shaking her head. "I'm fine, just thinking." "About what?" She hesitated, debating whether to share even a fragment of the truth. "Finally," she said, "about how different Earth is from where I came from." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You don't talk about your past much. Is it bad?" Leela looked down at her plate, tracing the edge of her napkin with her finger. "Not bad, exactly. Just complicated." "Well," Ethan said, after a pause, "you don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to. But if you ever want to talk, I'm here." "Okay." His words caught her off guard. No one had ever offered her that kind of unconditional support before. Not her parents, not her friends, certainly not the elders. For a moment, she considered telling him everything, the truth about her powers, her rejection by the Valens, her desperate escape to Earth. But the words stuck in her throat, refusing to come out. Instead, she nodded. "Thank you, Ethan. That means a lot." Later that night, As they walked back to the garage, Leela found herself wishing she could stay in that moment forever. The streets were quieter now, the city settling into its nighttime routine. Streetlights cast soft pools of light onto the pavement, and the air smelled faintly of rain. Ethan walked beside her, humming a tune she didn't recognize. For once, she didn't feel the need to hide, to pretend. She could almost believe that she belonged here. Almost. Back at the garage, Ethan unlocked the door and gestured for her to go inside. "Get some rest," he said, giving her a reassuring smile. Tomorrow's another day. Lila climbed the stairs to her apartment, her mind swirling with thoughts. She knew she couldn't keep living this double life forever. Eventually, she would have to make a choice: stay hidden, or risk everything by revealing who she really was. But for now, she allowed herself a small measure of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could be happy. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Leela replayed the day's events in her mind. The diner, the laughter, Ethan's kindness, it all felt so real, like a dream. She didn't want to wake up from for the first time since leaving her home planet. She let herself imagine a future where she wasn't running, where she wasn't afraid, a future with Ethan. And for the first time in years, she fell asleep with a smile on her face. Lila's life at the garage had settled into a comforting routine, but deep down, she knew it couldn't last forever. Every day brought new challenges, new questions she wasn't ready to answer. Still, she tried her best to focus on the present, soaking in the simple joys of working alongside Ethan and learning the intricacies of car repair. For now, that was enough. One afternoon, as Leela tightened a bolt on an old sedan, Ethan walked over with a clipboard in hand. "Hey," he said, leaning against the car. "You've been doing great work. I mean it. You're picking this stuff up faster than most people." Leela looked up, surprised by the compliment. "Thanks," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. I like it here." Ethan smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Well, you're part of the team now. Don't forget that." Her heart warmed at his words, but a flicker of guilt passed through her. She wanted to believe him, to trust that she truly belonged. Yet, every time she thought about her secret, the weight of it pressed heavily on her chest. How could she be part of anything when she wasn't even being honest about who she was? Later that evening, after closing up the garage, Ethan suggested they take a walk. The weather was cool and clear, the kind of night that made the city feel alive. Lila hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She enjoyed these quiet moments with him, away from the noise of the garage and the constant hum of engines. It gave her a chance to breathe, to feel almost normal. As they strolled along the sidewalk, Ethan began talking about his plans for the future. "I've been thinking," he said, kicking a pebble ahead of them. "Maybe it's time to expand the business. Find a bigger space, hire more people. What do you think?" Lila glanced at him, startled. "You'd want me to stay on if you did that." "Of course," Ethan replied without hesitation. "You're one of the best workers I've ever had. Plus," he paused, looking at her with a sheepish grin, "you're fun to have around." Her cheeks flushed, and she quickly looked away, focusing on the pavement beneath her feet. Fun? Was that how he saw her? The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Fun meant light-hearted, carefree things she hadn't felt in years, but it also meant temporary, fleeting. Could someone like Ethan really understand the depth of what she carried inside her? They reached a small park and sat on a bench overlooking a pond. Ducks floated lazily across the water, their reflections shimmering in the moonlight. Ethan leaned back, resting his elbows on the bench, and let out a contented sigh. "This is nice," he said. "We should do this more often." Lila nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. She watched the ducks, envying their simplicity. They didn't have secrets to hide or fears to run from. They simply existed, moving through the world without judgment or expectation. If only life could be that easy. You seem distracted, Ethan said after a while. His voice was gentle, probing but not intrusive. Something on your mind? She hesitated, weighing her options. Part of her wanted to tell him everything too. Reveal the truth about her powers, her past, her reasons for coming to Earth. But another part, the cautious part, reminded her of the risks. What if he rejected her? What if he called her a monster, just like the Valens had? I'm fine, she said finally, forcing a smile. Just thinking about home. Ethan tilted his head, curious. Do you miss it? The question caught her off guard. Did she miss her home planet? It was complicated. She missed the familiarity of it, the memories of her childhood before everything changed. But she didn't miss the rejection, the fear, the loneliness. Those feelings still lingered, buried deep within her, waiting to resurface. It's hard to explain, she said evasively. It's not like I left under the best circumstances. Ethan nodded, sensing she wasn't ready to elaborate. Well, if you ever need to talk, I'm here. No pressure, okay? His kindness nearly broke her. She wanted so badly to trust him, to let him in. But the walls she had built around herself were thick, reinforced by years of pain and isolation. Letting them down, even a little, felt impossible. The next day at the garage, Leela found herself distracted. Her hands moved mechanically as she worked, tightening bolts and checking fluid levels, but her mind was elsewhere. Images of her past flashed unbidden. The elders' cold stares, her parents' disappointed expressions, the way her friends had slowly drifted away. She clenched her fists, trying to push the memories aside, but they clung to her like shadows. Ethan noticed her unease and approached her cautiously. Everything all right? He asked, concern etched across his face. I'm fine, she muttered, avoiding his gaze. Just tired. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Take a break if you need to. There's no rush. Grateful for his understanding, Leela stepped outside for some fresh air. Leaning against the garage wall, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The sounds of the city surrounded her, the distant honking of horns, the chatter of pedestrians, the steady hum of traffic. It was overwhelming, yet strangely soothing, a reminder that she wasn't alone. But she was alone, in a way. No matter how much Ethan cared for her, no matter how much she wanted to belong, there was a part of her that would always feel separate. Her abilities set her apart, marking her as different, dangerous. Even here, on Earth, she couldn't escape that truth. As the days turned into weeks, Lila began to notice subtle changes in herself. Her telepathic powers, which she had tried so hard to suppress, seemed to be growing stronger. Sometimes, when she was focused on a task, she would accidentally pick up on Ethan's thoughts, stray memory, a fleeting emotion. Other times, she would sense the presence of nearby strangers, their energy brushing against hers like static electricity. It was disorienting, unsettling, and she worried it was only a matter of time before someone noticed. One evening, after finishing up at the garage, Lila decided to take a long walk to clear her head. The streets were quieter than usual, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. As she wandered aimlessly, her mind drifted back to the diner, to the nights spent talking with Ethan, to the moments when she had almost let her guard down. She wondered what it would be like to live without fear, without secrets. Would she ever find that kind of freedom? Lost in thought, she didn't notice the figure approaching until it was too late. A man in a dark coat stepped into her path, his face obscured by shadows. Leela, Arden, he said, his voice low and menacing. We've been looking for you. Her blood ran cold. Instinctively, she reached out with her mind, probing his thoughts, searching for answers. But instead of clarity, she was met with a wall of resistance, a mental barrier far stronger than anything she had encountered before. Whoever this man was, he wasn't human. Who are you? She demanded, taking a step back. Her heart pounded in her chest, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The man smirked, stepping closer. Let's just say I represent those who sent me. They're not happy about your disappearance. Fear gripped her, but she forced herself to stay calm. I don't owe them anything, she said firmly, her voice trembling despite her efforts to sound brave. Leave me alone. Oh, I can't do that, he replied, shaking his head. You see, they have plans for you. Plans you won't like. Before she could respond, he lunged forward, grabbing her arm. Pain shot through her body as his grip tightened, his strength unnatural. Desperation surged within her, and without thinking, she unleashed a burst of energy, pushing him away with all her might. The man stumbled backward, momentarily stunned, giving her enough time to break free and run. She didn't stop until she reached the garage, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Ethan was still inside, organizing tools and humming softly to himself. When he saw her, his expression shifted from casual to alarmed. Lila, what happened? She shook her head, unable to speak. Tears welled in her eyes as the reality of the situation hit her. They had found her. After all this time, they had come for her. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. Hey, it's okay. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Leela allowed herself to cry. Not because she was weak, but because she was overwhelmed with fear, with frustration, with gratitude. For the man standing beside her. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain, she couldn't face it alone. And maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to. Leela sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. Her hands trembled slightly, and she clenched them into fists to steady herself. The encounter with the man in the dark coat replayed over and over in her mind like a broken record. His words echoed in her ears. Asterisk, they have plans for you. Who were they? Were they Valens? Or someone or something else entirely? She didn't know, but one thing was clear. Her past had caught up with her. Ethan had tried to comfort her. When she returned to the garage that night, his voice calm and reassuring. But Lila couldn't bring herself to explain what had happened. How could she? Everything she had been running from, everything she had tried so hard to bury, was now staring her in the face. And worse, it put Ethan in danger. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was late, nearly midnight, but sleep felt impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the man's cold smile, felt the pressure of his grip on her arm. She shivered, pulling her knees closer to her chest. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she felt truly trapped. Downstairs, Ethan was still awake. He paced back and forth in the garage, unable to shake the image of Lila's tear-streaked face. Something had scared her badly. Something serious. He wanted to help, to protect her, but how could he if she wouldn't tell him what was wrong? Frustration bubbled inside him, mixing with concern. All he knew was that he cared about her more than he cared to admit, even to himself. The next morning, Leela avoided eye contact as she worked alongside Ethan. She focused intently on tightening bolts and checking oil levels. Anything to keep her mind occupied. But Ethan wasn't fooled. He watched her carefully, noting the tension in her shoulders and the way she flinched whenever someone new entered the garage. Finally, during a quiet moment, he approached her. Lila, he said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to tell me everything. But whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. Her breath hitched, and for a moment, she considered telling him the truth. But fear held her back. What if he didn't believe her? What if he thought she was crazy, or worse, dangerous? Instead, she forced a weak smile. It's nothing. Really. Ethan frowned, clearly unconvinced. You're not fooling me. Something's going on, and I want to help. I'm fine, she insisted, turning away. Just leave it alone, okay? He sighed, stepping back. All right, but if you change your mind, I'm here. As the day wore on, Lila grew increasingly anxious. Every shadow seemed menacing. Every unfamiliar sound sent her heart racing. She kept expecting the man in the dark coat to reappear, or worse, for others to come after her. By the time evening rolled around, she was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. That night, after closing up the garage, Ethan decided to confront her again. He followed her upstairs to her apartment and knocked gently on the door. When she opened it, her expression was guarded, wary. "We need to talk," he said firmly, stepping inside before she could protest. "I can't just sit by and watch you go through this alone." Lila crossed her arms, trying to appear calm. "There's nothing to talk about." "Yes, there is," Ethan countered. His voice softened, though his resolve didn't waver. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but I know it's scaring you, and I care about you too much to let you deal with it by yourself." Her defenses cracked slightly at his words. No one had ever spoken to her like that, like she mattered, like she deserved protection. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, and she quickly looked away. "You don't understand," she whispered. "You wouldn't." "Then make me understand," Ethan urged. He took a step closer, his gaze steady. "Whatever it is, Lila, you can trust me." For a long moment, she hesitated. The weight of her secret pressed down on her, suffocating. But then she remembered the look in Ethan's eyes, the sincerity, the kindness, and realized she couldn't keep lying to him, not anymore. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "I'm not normal," she started haltingly. "I'm not even human." Ethan blinked, startled. "What do you mean?" "I'm from another planet," she continued, her voice trembling. "My people, they call us Valens. We're advanced, powerful. At least, most of us are. But I'm different. I have abilities, powers, that no one else does." She paused, gauging his reaction. To her surprise, Ethan didn't laugh or call her insane. Instead, he nodded slowly, encouraging her to continue. "When I was born, my parents noticed something strange about me. I could sense things, emotions, thoughts, memories from other people. At first, they thought it was harmless. But as I grew older, my powers became stronger, uncontrollable. Sometimes, I'd accidentally project my feelings onto others, overwhelming them. Other times, I'd invade their minds without meaning to. My own people, they called me dangerous, chaotic." Her voice broke, and she swallowed hard before continuing. "They rejected me, Ethan. They cast me out because they were afraid of me. So I ran. I came here, to Earth, hoping to start over. But now," she trailed off, tears streaming down her face. "Now they've found me." Ethan stood silently for a moment, processing everything she had said. Then, without hesitation, he stepped forward and pulled her into a hug. "I'm so sorry," he murmured. "No one should have to go through that." Leela stiffened at first, unsure of how to respond. But then, overcome by emotion, she buried her face in his shoulder and let herself cry. For the first time in years, she felt safe, not because her problems had disappeared, but because she wasn't facing them alone. When her tears subsided, Ethan pulled back slightly, keeping his hands on her shoulders. "Okay," he said firmly. "We'll figure this out, together." "But how?" Leela asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saw what happened last night. That man, he's not human either. He's strong, powerful. If they send more, they won't hurt you," Ethan interrupted, his tone resolute. "Not while I'm around." His confidence gave her a small measure of hope, but doubt lingered. "You don't know what you're dealing with," she said. "These aren't ordinary enemies. They'll stop at nothing to get what they want." "And neither will I," Ethan replied. "We'll find a way to protect you. To protect us." Over the next few days, they devised a plan. Using Leela's knowledge of her pursuer's tactics and Ethan's resourcefulness, they set traps throughout the garage and surrounding area, motion sensors, hidden cameras, makeshift alarms, all designed to give them an early warning if anyone suspicious approached. During the day, life at the garage carried on, as usual. Customers came and went, oblivious to the tension simmering beneath the surface. But at night, Leela and Ethan stayed vigilant, taking turns keeping watch. Despite the danger, Leela found solace in their teamwork. Having someone by her side made her feel less powerless, less afraid. One evening, as they reviewed their preparations, Ethan turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think they'll come soon?" Leela shrugged, her brow furrowed. "I don't know. Could be tonight. Could be weeks from now. They're unpredictable." "Well, whenever it happens," Ethan said, determination etched across his face. "We'll be ready." As the hours ticked by, Leela struggled to stay awake. Exhaustion tugged at her eyelids, but she fought it, knowing she couldn't afford to let her guard down. Outside, the city was eerily quiet, the streets empty, save for the occasional passing car. Even the usual hum of distant traffic seemed muted. Suddenly, a faint beep shattered the silence. One of the motion sensors had been triggered. Leela shot upright, her heart pounding. "Someone's here." Ethan grabbed a flashlight and nodded toward the door. "Stay behind me." Cautiously, they crept outside, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The air was thick with anticipation, each second stretching endlessly. Then, out of nowhere, a figure emerged from the darkness. It was the man in the dark coat. "You shouldn't have run," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "It only makes things worse." Leela stepped forward, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. "Leave me alone. I'm not going back." The man smirked, shaking his head. "Oh, but you don't have a choice." Before he could move, Ethan stepped between them, brandishing the flashlight like a weapon. "If you take one more step, you'll regret it." The man laughed, a low, chilling sound. "Brave of you, human. But bravery won't save you." In response, Leela raised her hands, focusing all her energy on creating a barrier shield of telepathic force. The man hesitated, clearly surprised by her display of power. For a moment, the three of them stood frozen, locked in a tense standoff. Then, with a burst of determination, Leela pushed forward, driving the man back with a surge of energy. He stumbled, momentarily stunned, giving her and Ethan enough time to retreat inside and lock the door. Breathing heavily, they leaned against the wall, hearts racing. "That was close," Ethan muttered. "Too close," Leela agreed, her voice shaky. But despite the fear coursing through her veins, she felt a spark of defiance ignite within her. She wasn't going to let them win, not without a fight. The garage was quiet, save for the sound of Leela and Ethan's breathing. They stood in the dim light, their backs pressed against the wall, hearts still racing from the confrontation outside. The man in the dark coat hadn't followed them inside yet, but they both knew it was only a matter of time. He wouldn't give up so easily. Leela glanced at Ethan, her eyes wide with fear, but also gratitude. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "You could have gotten hurt." Ethan shook his head, his expression firm. "I wasn't about to let him take you, not without a fight." Her chest tightened at his words. No one had ever stood up for her like this. Not her parents, not her friends, certainly not the elders back on her home planet. For years, she had carried the weight of her powers alone, believing she deserved to be rejected. But now, standing beside Ethan, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: hope. "We need a better plan," Ethan said after a moment, breaking the silence. "We can't just keep hiding here." Leela nodded, though her mind raced with doubts. What kind of plan could possibly work against someone like that? Her pursuer wasn't just strong, he was calculating, relentless. And if he failed, others would surely come. She couldn't drag Ethan into this mess any further. It wasn't fair to him. "I'll leave," she said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "If I go, they'll follow me." you'll be safe. Ethan turned to her sharply, his brow furrowed. No way. I already told you. I'm not letting you face this alone. But it's my problem, she insisted, her voice rising slightly. This isn't your fight, Ethan. You don't deserve to get caught in the middle of it. And you don't deserve to be abandoned again, he shot back, his tone fierce. Look, I don't care what kind of trouble you're in, or who's after you. I'm not going anywhere. Got it? For a moment, they stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Then, slowly, Lila's shoulders sagged, and she looked away. You don't understand how dangerous this is, she murmured. What if they hurt you? What if they won't? Ethan interrupted, his voice softening. He reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. We'll figure it out, together. His unwavering determination left her speechless. How could someone believe in her so completely, even when she barely believed in herself? It was overwhelming and humbling. She realized then that running wasn't the answer. Not anymore. If she left, she'd be giving in to fear, letting her past define her once again. But staying meant fighting and trusting Ethan enough to stand by her side. Okay, she said finally, her voice barely audible. Together. A small smile spread across Ethan's face. Good. Now, let's think about what we're dealing with. That guy outside, he's tough, but he's not invincible. We just need to stay one step ahead of him. They spent the next hour going over every detail of their plan. Ethan suggested setting up decoys around the garage, a series of false alarms designed to confuse their pursuer. Meanwhile, Lila focused on strengthening her mental barriers, determined to use her powers more effectively. Though she had always feared losing control, she now saw her abilities as a weapon, one that might give them an edge. As dawn broke, they took turns resting while keeping watch. The tension was palpable, but there was also a strange sense of camaraderie between them. Working together gave Lila a renewed sense of purpose, reminding her that she wasn't alone. By mid-morning, the streets outside were bustling with activity. Customers began arriving at the garage, oblivious to the danger lurking nearby. Lila and Ethan played their roles perfectly, pretending everything was normal. But beneath the surface, they remained on high alert, ready for anything. It wasn't until late afternoon that the man returned. This time, he didn't try to sneak up on them. Instead, he strode boldly into the garage, his presence commanding attention. Several customers paused, startled by his sudden appearance, but he ignored them entirely. His gaze fixed on Lila. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said coolly, his voice carrying an edge of impatience. Come quietly, and no one gets hurt. Ethan stepped forward immediately, positioning himself between Lila and the intruder. Leave her alone, he said firmly. She's not going anywhere with you. The man smirked, clearly amused by Ethan's bravado. Brave words for a human, but bravery won't save either of you. Before anyone could react, Lila raised her hands, focusing all her energy on creating a barrier, a shimmering wall of telepathic force that blocked the man's path. He hesitated, taken aback by the strength of her resistance. Impressive, he admitted grudgingly, but futile. With a wave of his hand, he unleashed a burst of energy that shattered her shield, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. Lila stumbled backward, momentarily dazed, but quickly recovered. She clenched her fists, determination burning in her eyes. I won't let you take me, she declared, her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her veins. The man chuckled darkly. You have spirit, I'll give you that. But spirit won't win this fight. Ethan grabbed a wrench from the nearby workbench and brandished it like a weapon. Try us, he challenged, his stance defiant. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a swift motion, the man lunged toward them, his movements unnervingly fast. Lila reacted instinctively, throwing up another barrier just in time to block his advance. The force of the impact sent her stumbling, but she managed to stay on her feet. Ethan, Get back, she shouted, her focus entirely on the man. No, Ethan yelled back, refusing to budge. We're in this together, remember. Their pursuer paused, studying them with a mixture of curiosity and irritation. Touching, he sneered. But loyalty won't save you, boy. Lila seized the opportunity, channeling all her energy into a concentrated blast aimed directly at the man. To her surprise, it hit its mark, knocking him off balance. He staggered, visibly shaken, but quickly regained his footing. His expression darkened, anger flashing in his eyes. Enough games, he growled. This ends now. Before he could move, Ethan threw the wrench at him with surprising accuracy, striking him squarely in the chest. The distraction gave Leela the opening she needed. Summoning every ounce of strength she had, she unleashed a final, powerful surge of energy that sent the man crashing into the wall. He slumped to the ground, unconscious or, at least temporarily incapacitated. For a moment, the garage was eerily silent. Then, slowly, reality began to sink in. They had done it. Against all odds, they had fought back and won. Ethan turned to Leela, his face pale but triumphant. Are you okay? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. She nodded, though her legs felt weak beneath her. Yeah, she replied, her own voice shaky. I think so. He pulled her into a tight hug, holding her close, as if afraid she might disappear. That was insane, he muttered, half laughing, half breathless. But we did it. We actually did it. Lila rested her head against his shoulder, overwhelmed by a mix of emotions. Relief, exhaustion, pride and something else, something deeper. In that moment, she realized just how much Ethan meant to her. He had risked everything to protect her, proving beyond a doubt that she wasn't alone. As the adrenaline faded, they both sank onto the floor, too drained to move. Customers began to filter out, sensing the tension had passed, leaving the garage. Eerily quiet, once again. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ground. We should call the police, Ethan said after a while, glancing toward the unconscious man. Let them handle him. Leela hesitated. Will they believe us? About everything? He shrugged, offering a small smile. Maybe not. But we'll deal with that later. Right now, we just need to make sure he doesn't come after us again. She nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to relax, if only for a moment. Whatever came next, she knew she wouldn't have to face it alone.